Guys, we wanted to say welcome again to another episode of the Spirit Ninjas Spiritual AF podcast.
Yeah, we're excited that you're here because we have an amazing guest, and I'm so excited to connect with her. Her name is Nik Starr. First of all, that is a really cool name.
It's very cool.
It's a very cool name. But what's even cooler is she is an ordained Hindu high priestess from Australia.
Yes. And I just read her story earlier today, and it literally blew my mind. Like, this woman is just so incredible, and she has such a fascinating and interesting story that you guys are in for a real treat.
Yeah, and she's super relatable and grounded, and I could just talk to her forever. So I'm sure you're going to enjoy it because it's a really interesting conversation we have.
So stay tuned after the jingle.
Hey, you just turned into the Spirit Ninjas Spiritual as podcast. The show that aims to inspire, uplift, and questions everything. And now your hosts, Bart and Holly Emerson.
Hi, Nik. We're so happy to have you joining us. So for our listeners, we have Nik Starr. She is an ordained Hindu high priestess.
Yeah.
Pretty exciting
Hello,
stuff.
thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're excited to have you here. I guess to start, did you want to share a little bit about your story, or as little or as much of your story, so our listeners can kind of have an idea of who you are?
Sure. We could be on the line for several days, but I'll try and keep it like a nice little tight sharing, if you like. So I have quite the eclectic story, and I find it very interesting myself observing, living it. I'm just also in the process of writing it out quite. I've just done a big chunk of writing to prepare for a book that I'm going to be writing over the winter.
I love it.
And yeah, so it's very fresh right now, trying to kind of give a summation of the story. And so basically I was born in Australia, hence the
awesome accent.
Yeah, I born in Australia, and I grew up in a country town, which with a family kind of that was, I don't know, normal-ish. But I found that as I was growing up, I started doing ballroom dancing, and then I went into modelling and all of these things that kind of put a bit of a spotlight on me. And I was doing some TV shows, and I did a movie with Russell Crowe, and I found that being in the spotlight was a little bit uncomfortable. So I decided when I was 15 to turn out my light and try and find a normal path where things weren't so uncomfortable. And, it was a very, very interesting day that I made that decision. And so I tried to shut down the life that I'd been living in the spotlight. And I realised that, this was the end of grade 12 when I was finishing school, and the teachers, always ask you, what do you want to do when you leave school and all of these things. And the only answer I ever came up with is that I wanted to be happy and I wanted to help people. And I had no idea what that looked like or how that would unfold, considering all I wanted to do was sit in a cave and hide from everyone.
For sure.
So I can totally relate.
Yeah. Which funny, I ended up in a cave for a while. But so then I just started looking everywhere outside of me for this happiness. And I looked in many interesting places. I looked in bars and nightclubs, and I looked in beaches and all over countries. And then I looked in other countries and I couldn't find it. And so I just then, thought I could perhaps find it in a marriage. And I found some little taste there and had some children. But still, I don't know, I kind of felt empty and not whole. And so I just continued along the path of life and doing all these things, and had some pretty interesting careers, if you like. I used to train air traffic controllers, which people find most interesting. And that's actually where I found a husband, but that was a whole other story. Mm-hmm. And eventually I found the world of personal development, and I found some resonance there. And so, you know, the working on self type thing, I guess, was kind of led me to starting to look inwards. I met a lovely man that was a big catalyst in my life. And basically for the first time ever, I'd left my husband by this time, mind you, but for the first time ever, I'd met someone that was a little bit more crazy than me. And that was a pretty big deal. I was known as kind of someone that was quite out there in their way of trying to find this happiness. And so I went on a very deep journey with this lovely man. And then one day he died. And that set me into a really profound journey of learning to communicate with spirit, because he didn't want to leave this realm. And I just realized that, you know, that life really is very precious and I can't just plod along anymore. And so I found myself on a trip with a girlfriend of mine for her birthday in America. And I ended up in a labyrinth with a shaman in the Arizona desert. And he brought me back into this understanding of wholeness. And that just projected me into being taken to Bali by some friends. And I never, ever wanted to go to Bali. But, you know, by this time I was really recognizing that there were signs out there that I needed to follow. And when I arrived in Bali, something happened to me and I couldn't explain it at the time. And it was the beginning of a remembering. And the remembering was the thing that truly had activated everything that led me to being the Hindu high priestess that I am. And so while I was in Bali, I was filming this. The friends I was with were doing a research trip for retreats and stuff, and I was doing some filming out at the Green School with them. And one of the founders of the Green School was giving an explanation of his story. And I just realized that, you know, there was these tears streaming down my face. And I'm like, my eyes are leaking, because I wasn't crying, but I was just really overcome. And then I turned off the camera and just stood back and said, I'm moving to Bali. But it came out my mouth and it was red cursive writing and it went around my left ear. And I'm like, oh my God, you're really starting to lose your mind. Yeah. But I couldn't imagine how I could actually ever move to Bali. You know, I was a single mother that I was co-parenting and I had 2 businesses that I was running in Australia. And the fact to move countries, you know, it just seemed like impossible. But I had this vision and I could see my son, who is now 15, running around like where I was. And I kept having these visions, these really, really strong visions that day. And again, I thought, you know, I just needed to have another beer or something. And,
the go-to.
You know, things are all getting a bit much here. Yeah, the beer was always the go-to. But what did happen is I just followed this energy because of all these extraordinary things that had happened to me precursoring this. And somehow it just unfolded, like quite effortlessly. I sold my 2 businesses to one of my clients for more money than I actually wanted, which was really, really amazing. Perplexing to me.
So cool.
Yeah, my ex-husband said, yes, take the children to Bali. And I was like, wow, that's quite unexpected. And he got a job like far away from where we were living at the time. So I recognized in any event our parenting was going to really change. And then, you know, and I went through my house, which was full of very beautiful things. And I thought, oh, okay, what am I going to keep here? And then I got to the point where I'm like, this is just all stuff. And I'm going to let it all go, which, again, was really, really surprising to me. So I went through this extraordinary process of letting go of everything. And I ended up with 2 boxes, which had some paperwork that apparently I was supposed to keep, and 6 pairs of really cool boots. And all my journals, because they were the only things I couldn't let go of. Anyway, I just have the journals now.
Amazing.
So
no boots left.
So exactly. So very quickly, it was only like 3.5 months, I found myself on the airplane. My ex-husband decided that he needed to keep the children while I set up over there, and they would spend a whole school term with him, which I thought was a little bit challenging, but it made sense to me at the time. I was on the plane to Bali, and I sat there and I said to myself, "What are you doing?" And I went, because I hadn't actually allowed myself to think this, because every time I tried to think that, I would go into some sort of meltdown, panic attack.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Totally know that feeling.
We know all about that as well.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm on the plane going, "No, like, seriously, what are you doing?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And I'm like, "No, seriously, what are you doing?" And I'm like, "I have no clue and no idea what I'm doing. All I know is that this is the only thing that has ever felt right to me, ever."
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, "Okay, gin and tonic, please." And I just went, "Okay, well, let's just keep going." And so I got off the plane, and again, I was overwhelmed with this intensity that I couldn't understand at the time. And I went and stayed in a hotel for a few days and just landed. And that was really, really intense, because I went into a state of exhaustion because it was just such a huge thing. And very quickly, I don't know, within about 10 days or so, I met a woman who took me to a ceremony. And that's when kind of things started stacking up and making more sense. And I came into a temple with a whole heap of local people that didn't speak the language, and I felt home for the first time in my life. And I really didn't understand that, but I didn't care. And so I would show up there every week and just sit. For the first time in my life, I could just sit in the corner, and no one wanted to put a spotlight on me. No one wanted anything from me. And I felt a sense of normal. And I had never felt normal before. And very quickly out of that, the guru said to me, "It's time now." And I said, "Time for what?" And he said, "For you to become a master. You know, many people come to me and want me to teach them everything, and you've never asked me anything, and you show up here every week. It's time for you to be a master." And I'm like, I don't even know what that means. And I don't even know if I want to do that. And my interpreter said to me, you don't really question this. Like, everyone would like this. And so I'm like, okay. So in the interim, I'd found a place to live, and it had a beautiful spare room. And so I realized that I could maybe perhaps rent that out and make some income and stuff, because the whole plan and no idea thing. Sure, I had a little everything I'd sold, I had a little bit of money, but that wasn't going to last me for very long, or ever for that matter. Yeah. And so I'd kind of worked out a way to supplement a little bit of income for me to be able to just keep going. And it just kept going, and it just kept going, and it just kept going. And I just found that I would just follow the energy, and I would just kind of do as I was told. And being in a place of deep surrender to my divine path, because that's what was unfolding, was what I learnt was exactly what I needed. Because in the middle of this, my ex-husband said to me, "I'm not going to send those children over anymore. I'm just going to keep them in Australia." And I went in, yeah. It was a little bit intense and a little bit horrible. And so I spent a lot of time on the floor in a corner trying to manage that, because my mother said to me, "So you better come back to Australia now and get your kids." But I felt like I was stuck. I felt like I couldn't move, and I knew that that wasn't what I needed to do, and it didn't make any sense to me at all. I felt like someone had stolen my children, but I just had to continue where I was, and it was a very extraordinary place to be. But in hindsight, and now, much later on, I understand that it too was a divine plan. They had a very big module that they had to spend with their father to learn what they needed to learn. And in that, it gave me the space to become an ordained Hindu high priestess, which, I could never imagine was going to be my future. And I thank him every day for showing up in our soul contract the way he did. And, at the time I thought he was the meanest person I'd ever met. But in fact, he was showing up in such an impeccable way for me to, for me to have this divine plan unfold. it couldn't have worked any other way.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I have such incredible gratitude for him being the meanest person in the world. He did a really good job.
Incredible. So cool.
And so, yeah, I know, right? And so I was able to, you know, to go to all these ceremonies, and I was taken into villages for weeks at a time. And I met a grandmaster from Java, and, you know, I started learning really intense energy work. And when I had to do my graduation, I had to go and activate a volcano. Wow. Which was, you know, a pretty
just a small little task
event. You know, just Saturday afternoon activating volcanoes. Basically, you know, there wasn't any kind of lava spurting out or anything, but I had to create the energy to allow the to basically for the steam to arise.
Wow.
And fortunately I managed to do that, so I got
Incredible.
my little graduation.
Wow.
How cool.
I've never heard of that before. That is really cool.
Yeah, so I mean, you know, I had all these extraordinary experiences which felt very normal to me, because everything else, you know, had never felt normal. And I don't know, like, it was living it at the time, like, you don't think about how extraordinary it is, because it's also really, really hard trying to find the balance between, you know, making money to be able to go and see children as often as possible, and feeding yourself while, you know, being dribbling messes in villages, trying to understand what's going on with you was a really difficult time, and it allowed me to, you know, to mature to a place to be able to handle these things, and it was that through that sort of like emotional maturity that I became the energy that, you know, gets called upon to become a high priestess. And I didn't kind of understand that at the time either. So basically how I created like a business around this like journey was, you know, I'd post sort of like bits and pieces on Facebook, and people would say to me, "Oh my God, that's amazing." And I'm like, "Yeah, I guess." And people were like, "Oh my God, I'd love to spend a day with you." And so I had this vision of people coming and spending a day with me or days with me. And I started then basically running retreats, and I would take them through like some fun stuff I did. And in those early days, I kind of just felt like a guide, like a friend, come hang out with me, and you know, tour guide. But they started wanting to know, like, ask me questions and ask advice. And I'm like, yeah, right, I've got like 8 people with me that are going through really intense processes. I probably should support them in this and not just be their little friend. And so again, it was just naturally called upon me to continue to step up and step into these roles. So, you know, there was no goals of attainment ever that I had within me. There was no, you know, trajectory or plan, and there certainly was never a textbook or book that was given to me on how to be a Hindu priestess. That never happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it just unfolded, and it continued to unfold. And, you know, so I originally started off with as a master, and then converted to Hinduism, and then got taken into the role of Manku, which is basically a priest. And from Manku, I became priestess. And then just in June of this year, I got taken into high priestess. And like I said, we could talk about this for days and days and days and days. So that's like kind of a little snippet for you, if you like.
Yeah, I encourage everybody listening to this to go check out nikstarr.com and read your story. I read it earlier today, and it just blew my mind.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, wow, right. Exactly. That's it.
There were so many wow moments. Like, how did she deal with this? Like, how is this actually happened? It was crazy, just crazy. Like, everything that you've been through in your life is just incredible.
Yeah, the whole surrender.
And that's a great thing, because I have written so much about it in the Her Story on my website, and I'm really glad that you got a chance to read that, because it kind of impacts people that read it.
Yeah.
Yes. You know, it's one thing that like the theme that kept coming up over and over in the story is really like this idea of surrender. And how in all these moments throughout your life, you were just guided towards just surrender, and you surrendered again, and then something else would happen and you would surrendered, and you just allowed things to unfold. I mean, like, that was incredible.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. men coming at you with, swords trying to stab you, and you've got to surrender into that moment. There's a pretty significant level of surrender that I've had to get into. So, the theme of surrender is certainly one that's been right up there.
Yeah, that's something that Bart and I were talking about today, just with the journey that we're on. And I was saying to him, I was like, wow, I feel like we keep learning this process of surrender over and over again, because every now and then it's like the monkey mind or the ego steps in and questions what you're doing, and then you have to learn to just stop and follow the breadcrumbs from the universe.
Yeah, absolutely. I find that, embodying the values of faith and trust really help in the path of surrender, because I don't know, it gets very confused for the Western mind, thinking surrender could be like to be a doormat or to having to let everything go, and it's like it's actually not that at all. It's nothing like that. It's a very brave soul that is willing to go into a state of surrender, and it's certainly not stepping into the state of being, I don't know, giving up. It's certainly not giving up. And that's kind of a confusion I find, that people, like, when I say, come on, you just need to surrender, and they're like, I don't understand what you're saying at all. That means give up? I'm like, no, it doesn't mean. It means be brave. So, yeah,
I like what you said there, because when I think about, what was surrender when I was a little kid, it was like, I guess, the first times when I'm thinking about it now, it's like you're playing a game in gym class, and it's like, do you surrender to the other team? And it's like a giving up kind of.
Yes.
You're giving up the victory.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I just had a vision of like cowboys and Indians.
Yeah, totally.
Hands up.
I surrender. And it is, it's like to give up. And, who's going to surrender first? And it's, I don't know, like most English words, there's such many different connotations and stuff. And it's just one's perception of what it means.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's incredible. And something that I think we all need to be mindful of is that there is this greater plan, that if you do surrender and you just allow your life to unfold the way it's supposed to, and you just follow those breadcrumbs, that you're actually led towards your highest goal, your highest potential, whatever that is for you. But that is scary. Like, for most people, I would say that maybe for everybody, that is a scary thing.
Yeah, like if you knew how scary it was going to be before you left Bali, would you have done it? Like, if you know.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. Because I was done. Like, I was at that point. Like, I was like, I'd actually been several months beforehand through an elaborate process of working out the most efficient and least impactful way of suiciding, right? Because I was like, I just can't do this anymore. This is just all too much. And so I was like, and like you get to a point where it's either, which way am I going to give up? And so it was like, I was up for anything that could like help me shift from, I got to a point where, I was so sick and tired of being sick and tired. I was like, what are you going to, like, bring it on? And that's the whole premise of my life. It's always been like, bring it on. And so they're like, right, bring it on. We'll show you.
Yeah.
I don't know. It gets to a point where it's a relief though. Like I was relieved that things unfold. I had to understand the unfolding. I don't know. Like, I've always been a devil. When I was going through the whole process of what am I going to do when I grow up besides be happy, is I thought about being a stunt woman, because I've always been like lived on the edge a lot.
Sure, yeah, it's amazing.
I used to ride motorbikes and do high speed, water skiing and all sorts of like really daredevilish stuff, and always had a very brave part inside me. But again, it was just never nurtured, and I didn't know how to express that at all until, I found my way. And I don't know, it's just such a relief. I don't know, there's so many things in life that I've thought are scary, and it's just not. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. Like I just find now that anything that comes at me, I race towards it. Always. I always race towards it. And the more it looks scary or I feel uncomfortable, the more I know I need to race towards it. Because I've had so much, I have so much evidence that this is my highest good and is that divine plan unfolding. And, I just need to get out of my own way. And I do. I run towards everything, no matter what. And it's easier. It's so much easier than to be scared. It's so much easier than to be like in anxiety or depressed or like not knowing what to do. It's so much easier to like, Bart said, to follow those breadcrumbs and just have, a level of curiosity of knowing that this is mine. This is my life path. This is my divine plan. And I'm just going to go there because
Yeah, having that faith and trust in it versus the fear of the mind.
Yeah, what's amazing is that, I think society in general society has created this world where, everybody's in this pressure cooker. There's all these expectations that we're supposed to be a certain way, that we're supposed to succeed a certain way, in the external world. And it creates this world of pain where people en masse are suffering so much. The case of anxiety are like crazy through the roof. People are like over half of the American population now is on antidepressants of some kind. Like this is craziness, but it's, we've said this before on this show is, the pain and suffering pushes until the vision pulls.
Yeah.
Right. So you reach a point where you're done with the suffering. You can't take it anymore.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden there's like you reach a breaking point and then you can create life from a very different place. And that sounds like, you've done over and over in your life. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah. Absolutely. And the other thing is, especially so many people I work with, that have either been on antidepressants or are on antidepressants. I get it. I understand. Like I had postnatal depression with my daughter. I was on antidepressants. And there was another episode about 4 years after that, I was medicated again. So I know all about it. It's really good having the experience. And it blocks you. They're blockers. They block your connection and they make you numb so that you can exist and function. And, that can be quite helpful if you're in a really bad state. And, I totally get that because that really helped me until I was like, I can't feel anything, nothing. I'm kind of bored because I can't have joy and I actually don't have sorrow. I've got nothing. And so what I do know is that when anybody's trying to have a deep connection and connect with their higher truth, connect with, divine source energy, connect with, their divine plan, it's very, very difficult when you're highly medicated.
Well, isn't most of people's lives medicated in some form? I'm not talking about just, antidepressants, but, we reach for that glass of wine or, we roll a joint, which can be helpful in some cases, but other times we use it as a distraction or, we put on the TV and we watch 4 hours of TV straight and all of a sudden you're just numb during that period.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's the whole escapism to get away from it all. The thing I find with the medication though, is it's a long term, it does block you. Whereas, the escapism bits and pieces, they kind of give you a fix for 5 minutes, but actually just take you away from your higher self as well. And that is the go-to, everyone supports that, everyone's like, oh, just have a glass of wine and, just do this and you just need a rest, and it's like everybody's, supporting everybody into that path. And that's why, the world is in such a crazy state right now. The level of suffering that is occurring, and the insanity that's going on is like just a reflection from the inner world of the majority. And the outer world is, in such a state of, catastrophe, literally, because we're not willing to surrender into what, life is offering and be willing to be brave enough to go forth into all of these opportunities, which look like, hard stuff, but they're actually just opportunities. they're opportunity for evolution. And that is the only reason why we're here on Earth, is to evolve.
Yes.
And we have...
It's something that I want to make it clear, and correct me if I'm wrong, but, this evolution, this surrendering, it's not away from happiness, because we seem to think that, by surrender, by just allowing God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, to call the shots, that we're somehow going to be like a martyr, right? That we're going to be living, in squalor. We're going to be, a homeless guy on the street because we're not going to be able to make ends meet, because we picture saintly people in these like little loincloths, like they're in some monastery, but that's not the way it works.
No, not at all. They're the lucky ones who gets it easy. like it'd be really easy to go and live in a monastery and get fed, and all you have to do is sit and talk to God all day. That would be so good, right? So easy.
Yeah, you don't have to deal with the pressures of everyday life.
But exactly, and that's the thing that I've been able to find a real balance with. I'm a mother of 3 children. I run businesses, and I have a really strong daily practice, and I have all of this balanced out. And that's why I've been able to continue to, be called upon to rise into the next state, which again, I'd be sitting there and I get a message, get a WhatsApp message from the high priestess going, you need to come to ceremony on Saturday, and you need a new outfit because you will be, becoming a priestess. And I'm like, okay.
All right then.
Right. I better go shopping to get a new outfit. And she's like, you've just gone through such an incredible experience, and you continue to show up. You continue to look after your children. You continue to do all these things and expand and not contract. And through your expansion is how I call upon you to come and be a priestess. I'm like, right, well, I just went through a really big, hardcore, really intense thing, and it was really horrible. But it's actually so much better out the other side now, and I need to be a priestess. Okay, sure.
I love how you get texts to come become a high priestess, where other people get texts to go have drinks at the bar.
Exactly. Oh, look, it's just so funny. Yeah, absolutely.
It's so great.
I know.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to ask you is, you mentioned how through this journey you had a lot of remembering. So it wasn't that you were necessarily taught by someone else. Yes, you had that as well, but you also had a lot of remembering. And so I'm curious to learn more about what that was like. And then also, how did you manage your ego telling you like, okay, come on, Nik, you're not really remembering this. Like, you're just going crazy, or whatever your monkey mind said to you. Because I imagine, I mean, that's something that I experience for myself, and what my knowing tells me. And then, I have that little voice. It's like, well, how do you really know that?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's another interesting story, isn't it? The remembering, it is. It's a very confusing time until you know. And the ego is a very sneaky thing that can have you questioning all sorts of part of the journey. But to specifically answer your question, when the remembering came, thick and fast, and was very clear that I was in an actual state of remembering, because, I was able to recite, stories and teachings out of, the Bhagavad Gita, the ancient Hindu textbook, never having read it. And, I just knew all of this stuff, and I had no idea how I knew, but, it was evidentially coming out of my mouth. And,
Incredible.
and my teachers were like going, right, you've been studying? I'm like, no. And then they asked me a question, I'd answer it. I'm like, wow, really that?
Amazing. Where did this come from?
And I know. And so I was like, my conscious mind was learning all of this stuff coming out of my unconscious at the moment it was happening for me. So there was an actual moment in time where that occurred from. Like I have like a point. And so I'd been through some fairly disciplined time, which was also very interesting because I had a negative association with the word discipline. Wasn't a fan of it, and I didn't like it because I went to an all-girls Catholic school and we were disciplined a lot.
Fair enough. I understand that.
And, you know, and if someone's going to tell me what I need to do, then that's not going to happen. I'm not going to be disciplined, and I'm not going to do that every single day because you told me to, because I'm a rebel. So no, none of that. And, so I had to do a little work with discipline because I kept being told I needed to be disciplined and do my morning practice and all of this stuff. And I was like, okay, let's just find another word about, you know, me practicing and becoming a master, but not disciplined. Well, I'm not going to do that. Eventually I became great friends with the word discipline, and I now know that discipline leads to freedom, and that's all I've ever wanted in life, is to feel a sense of freedom, because that is beyond happy. We can be happy but not free, and so freedom came when I went through happy. So I've been through I created a very strong discipline for myself, which I used my rebel energy to achieve, because it's the only way it would work, you know, and I would prove them wrong that I wouldn't give up. And I always had this, you know, my mother's voice inside me going, oh, Nicole, you never did. And so I'm like, right, I'll prove her wrong and I'll prove everybody else wrong. And that's the energy I used to be able to go into discipline. Extraordinary. And so I did. I went into a lot of discipline, and I was doing a lot of refined Kundalini practice, and I was meditating daily, and I was, you know, I was doing a lot of refined practices that had been suggested to me. But I found for me is I gathered all the bits and pieces that work for me and created my own practice, because, again, that's what I need to do to make things work for me.
For sure.
And so I'd been doing a lot of that, and I'd been going to ceremony a lot. And then one night I had gone into the holy room, and my guru I could tell he was up to something, because he had that look in his eyes, and basically he transferred pure Shakti energy inside me. Anything could happen from now on. And I went into trance, and I'd been into trance a few times before that, which is always very interesting, because I'd watch all these other people in trance and I'm like, whoa, what's going on with them? Like, I could never have imagined myself going into that. But when you are working with high energy a lot, and you're in these situations, and you've got to refine practice, and you're purifying your field to be able to allow the energy to integrate with you, because your vibrations shifted and it's met it, then you're able to go into a trance-like state. So I went into trance, and then something started happening inside me, and it felt like what happens just before an ecstasy pill kicks in. Okay?
Crazy.
So anyone's had an ecstasy pill before knows what I'm talking about. Your whole body starts getting really, really hot, and the euphoria starts building and building and building. And, you know, it's kind of like an orgasmic state that is so pure that, you know, it's in every cell of your body. And all of a sudden, like, I'm in this state, and then my head literally kind of blows apart, and I reach a state of ecstasy. So and basically my body kind of froze, and I was like kind of stuck, but I was experiencing, you know, these states of ecstasy that I had never achieved before, and I'd only heard of, and it was like the pure Shakti working through me. And eventually I kind of slowly came out of it, but I was in these states of bliss, of like absolute, you know, divinity was running through me, and it went on for days and days and days. And
wow.
Yeah. And I knew in that moment I never have to take drugs ever again.
Amazing.
Like to be able to reach these states of consciousness, to reach these states of bliss and ecstasy, nothing that I could take from the external inside could ever reach that again. And so it was whatever happened in that moment triggered the remembering and a state of remembering occurred, I guess. And like I said, all of these things started coming, and I don't know, like I just knew things that I'd never been taught before, and I'd never I never knew where I got the information from, and I just was able to access as well information. Like I started doing refined third eye practices so I could open my third eye, and I was able to, access like different dimensions and access divine wisdom and all of these things. Like it was very, very easy for me. So there was never a question at the time of my ego going, what are you doing? Because I was just as dumbfounded about what was happening. I was probably like anti-ego at the time because I'm like, I really don't know what's going on here. I don't know how I know this stuff, and it's kind of tripping me out. And if I allow it to trip me out anymore, then I'll lose my mind. And so I need to keep disciplined to keep it together, because there were many times during, my awakening, because it was a very fierce awakening, that I did feel like I was losing my mind. And, there was times for a while that I would, just literally go to the bar and sit there and drink as much booze as I can to try and feel normal, because this was a whole other level of normal. And it got to a point where I couldn't even drink booze anymore because it would just smash me because of my vibrational state and my light body. It couldn't take in the toxins and alter my state. My state always won because it was so high, such a higher frequency. And so, I can't even drink booze anymore.
Yeah.
All of these things.
Yeah.
Which has been really helpful because, I used to tether on the lines of, high functioning alcoholic for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been really helpful. It was like one day, like a switch flipped, and I'd probably drink, a glass of petrol before I had a glass of wine these days, which is very, very surprising. But getting back to on point is, the remembering occurred through a very, very refined discipline, a very strong practice that I didn't understand. Again, was never a goal. These things kind of occurred spontaneously, and I just kept going into it. I never ever contracted. I just was too far gone because I just knew that, I don't know, you get to a point where you just know, like, this is life, but this is my life, and this is the point of my life. Like, this is evolution. This is why I'm here, and just so keep going. And I don't know, like, I just go and sit places and I'm like, that's my normal life, and most people don't get that. Okay, and I have to kind of adjust a little bit to that too, because I need to be able to function in the world with the masses and take my children to school and go to the supermarket and do all of those things, especially now that I've moved out of my Bali bubble and into North America. So, yeah, it's continual divine plan, unfolding, mastery, every moment.
I love your fierceness.
Yeah.
The bold fierceness and really the surrendering and allowing. I think that's really special.
Yeah. What would you say to someone who's, living like just their regular existence? They're not totally feeding their mission, whatever that is on this earth, but they're too scared to, allow. What would you say? Like, what kind of guidance would you have for someone?
Well, it's always good to find someone to support you, because that way you can lean in. And I don't know, it's very difficult to try and find the way if you don't even know what it is. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you're too scared to, like, allow these opportunities that come to you for you to, like, surrender into them or whatever, like, I mean, unfortunately in today's world, we don't have a village where we can go to the shaman and ask for help. We don't have rites of passages. People just don't know what to do. And especially if they're having these feelings of awakenings and stuff, where do you go to? And even if, you had a local priest or something, at the Catholic Church, he probably mightn't be able to help you with, the feelings and emotions that you're having. I don't know. I've always found that finding someone that, you have a resonance to, that you feel a call to, and ask for help. Like, it takes a brave soul to be able to ask for help. And you'll generally find if the person that that is willing to help you, they will say yes, and if you go to someone and go, oh my God, I really feel aligned with you and whatever, and they say no, then it's actually a no. I don't know, like I just would go and try and find someone to help. And whether that's even through someone like a book, if you found a book on Deepak Chopra or something, to be able to kind of help you and support you so you're not feeling crazy, because most people do. They feel crazy and then they try and shut it down. And that's a really great sign that, you're feeling crazy. You feel like you're losing your mind. You are. And that's awesome.
So perfect.
We want to lose that mind.
Yeah, I love that. And I think something that we should also clarify too is, when you even just begin to question, when, you reach a point where you just realize that you're unhappy and you're willing, like at some level, you're willing to, open yourself up to something else. I think, you do receive that guidance, whether it is that book that falls on the floor at the local chapters, or, you bump into someone who who introduces you to someone else. And that state of unfolding, like it happens. So if you're meant to meet your guru, you will do that.
Yeah.
But, I think getting to that state of, surrender, or even just questioning, right? Because I think most people just kind of go through life just accepting the ideas that were given to them by their parents, by their society, by their work, whatever. This is what my life is supposed to be. But when, you at least can ask, okay, well, maybe this isn't it. Maybe there's something else for me. That like little step can be a catalyst to, the next 50 little steps that'll take you to wherever it is that you need to go. But questioning, I think, is so important.
Yeah, and I think
definitely.
Ultimately we know too. Like we always have, at least I've always had that little voice, in my mind. And for me, I've always wanted joy in my life. And so when I didn't have it, it's like, okay, why? Like I'm happy, everything seems perfect, but there's still something that's missing. So I think it's like, learning to listen to that, to acknowledge that. And then there's that great saying of when the student is ready, the teacher appears.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
It's like the Course in Miracles. I mentioned this, I think last time. It was like, how do you know you're on the right path? By the amount of peace that you feel at this moment. And if you're going through all this angst and anxiety and depression, whatever, well, chances are you need to make some kind of change, right?
Yeah.
Because
good chance.
That path of, awakening, it is a path to peace, to joy.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is also very interesting because people have little tastes of peace and they find it boring. They're like, where's the drama? People get so addicted to, the highs and lows that go in life. And it's like, well, there's not much happening. It's kind of, it's peaceful, but it's kind of boring. And it's like, oh, yes, exactly. It's because we're used to and quite addicted to, the drama circle. And so, kind of making this concept of peace another refined part of one's journey to understanding that there is no drama in peace, and to be willing to find, the balance and the way to kind of ease into that, because that's a big sneaky thing that happens to so many people is they kind of do so much work and then get a bit bored and then go in search of, a little bit of excitement, a little bit of action.
That's such a good point. Because I experienced that quite a bit, earlier on in my journey, where it was a little bit boring, and those highs and the lows are addictive. Like not the lows necessarily, but certainly the highs.
Yeah. Right? Well, they come generally after the lows,
but
they kind of
you can't have one without the other. It's like that cycle.
Yeah.
But it is easy to get addicted to that.
Yeah. Yes. I remember in my early 20s, I made the conscious choice to take a break from the path, You know, I was like, well, there's all these things I want to do.
Pause button.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, I can't do that if I'm like really spiritual and on my highest path. So I was like, yeah, so I took a detour.
Yeah,
I took a conscious
totally cool.
detour.
Exactly. I'm just going to go over there for a bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's kind of how society raised us too. You know, you're raised in North America and you think, oh, I want to accomplish these sort of things or have these sorts of experiences. And in my mind, I was like, well, I can't have that kind of fun if I'm on, you know, this spiritual self-improvement path. So I'm going to be in my 20s instead. You know?
Exactly. Which is the greatest illusion because, you know, to be able to reach, you know, states of ecstatic bliss is beyond anything that you can find in the detour section.
Oh, it's so true. It's so true.
We just don't get it.
Yeah. It was funny too because I was like happy when I made that choice, and then it was like detour went totally downhill, and then like to get out of it was a lot more effort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. But again, that is totally the path that you needed to do. So it was all perfect anyway.
Yeah, it is. And so a new project that I noticed on your website that you have is you've just created some new oracle cards, and it's something that you've done with your daughter?
Yes, exactly. Amazing. Such an amazing little process, that one. Yeah, with my daughter. And so again, nothing that I planned.
I love it.
One of my students painted a picture of me, and quite an animated she's an abstract kind of artist, and she painted this picture of me, and it's just gorgeous. And the day after she gave it to me, I was looking at it and I thought that would be a really cool oracle card. And I was like, that's a weird thought. Like, why? What? That's a weird thought. Anyway, and so I didn't think about it again. And then when I was unpacking it, when I moved, I opened it up, and again, I saw it as an oracle card, and I'm like, all right, you know, people have asked me for years, you know, that I should do oracle cards and all of this stuff. And I was like, yeah, I don't even know how to do that. I don't even know what to do with that. Anyway, and so then I somehow in the magic land of Facebook, there was someone talking about trying to make some oracle cards, and someone gave a link of where you can get just one box made. And I mean, they're quite expensive, but still I was like, oh, there's a how-to. And so I went and had a little look there, and I don't know, eventually it led me through, you know, the little rabbit warren you take when you click into things, some publishing houses and some print houses. And so I wrote to them and I asked them information, you know, just following the energy. And I just went, okay. And they told me, you know, how you needed to create the files and all of this stuff, and I didn't understand the jargon they were talking about. So I just said to my daughter, who's just finished school and is in between waiting for her uni placements, and I said, do you know how to do this? And she said, I don't, but I have used that program before, because she started a magazine when she was in school, and she said, that's a program we use, so I'll just have a little look. And she's like, yeah, I know how to do that. And I said, oh, okay, well, all right, I'll get back to you. And then I thought, well, maybe I could get her to create the artwork, because I'm not going to create the artwork. Anyway, so I gave her an example of a card, which was the card of the painting, and she made it into the flat file format that needed for the publishing house. And then I sent it to them, and they're like, yes, that's correct. And I'm like, okay. And they gave me the prices and everything. And I'm like, okay, I've got all the information. I can do this. And so I was like, okay, we'll just keep going. And so then I just was I found some different images and stuff, which I was going to use as my base. And I was going to get her to do stuff to it, digital artwork to it. But instead, I started playing with it, and I started bringing in ceremony. I started doing my thing. I, you know, would open up my Svadhisthana chakra, and the creativity started flowing, and I have incense burning, and all of a sudden I was creating all this digital artwork.
So cool.
And and the deity or the energy of the card was coming through, and I was going into process and all of this stuff, and then I was sending it to her, and she was changing the format. And then she started giving me all of this feedback, and then all of a sudden we're in this co-creation together. I know, and I was like, okay. And when I started writing the wisdom book, it was just mind-blowing, like what was coming through then. Because I just thought, I'd write, Shiva is a deity, da-da-da-da-da. But no, that's not what happened. It was a full-blown process. And interestingly, I was having trouble with the fonts. And I'm like, Ruby, daughter, you need to help me with these fonts. And she's like, no, Mum, you have to do it. And I'm like, oh, my God, if only Douglas was here to help me. Douglas is my ex that died, and he's a creative director. And so next minute I know I'm in ceremony, in comes, Douglas, and he's showing me the fonts that I need to use for it. And so I've got like dead exes, daughters, and all sorts in this creative project, and the most amazing, profound oracle cards for birth. And, so that's how we came about that little new product.
I love it. And if people are interested in that, where do they go and find those?
It's actually on the very front page of my website right now. So it's as soon as you open my website, it's right there.
Which is nikstarr.com. So NIKSTARR.com. Yeah. We'll put it in the link below and on our website as well, so people can find you. That is very cool. I have to check them out. I know that you had created them, and I have to go poking around. And you also have Malice.
I do.
I love them. I'm like, I want to buy everything.
I do. So also on that website, there's a store. So in the spirit store, you'll find lots of different little things. The cards are in there as well. But I have the malas, and I also have different sacred geometry. And my phone keeps telling me it's going to run out of battery.
Oh no.
Yeah, well,
okay.
Yeah.
We're getting close to an hour as it is, so we can always
okay, great.
Call it here. But Nik, we just wanted to say thank you so much for being here and sharing your story with our audience. I think so many people will resonate with just this idea of surrender and just trusting that process, because I think something that we all need so much is just the ability to trust, to let go.
Yeah.
Have faith.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So that's super cool.
Yeah, and I think that the good thing that people find, a lot of people come to me and they're like, you're so relatable. You're not this big, man with a big beard on the side of a mountain. I feel sometimes that you're telling my story. And so I'm a really good example of showing others that, just go, honey, just do it.
Definitely. And you can still function in this world. You don't need to be shipped off to some mountaintop.
Yeah. You don't need to give up everything.
You can still function, and you can still have children, and you can still have businesses that make money and be very, very comfortable. And still reach ecstatic states of, pure bliss and live your divine path. It's all totally possible. And, it's nothing special. It's just be brave and, and really think about that concept of surrender, because it's just your divine calling for you to expand and not contract. So,
and everyone has it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I love it.
Thank you.
So thank you so much. And if anybody listening, I'm sure there's going to be lots of people. But go to nikstarr.com and connect with Nik. You've got a lot of really cool products, but also, like you said, you work with people and you do online temples. So it doesn't matter where you're located in the world. You can still work with Nik, which is
That's
awesome.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, everything you need to know is on the website and all my different offerings and everything. And I do, one-on-one chats, and I do big, long journeys and everything. So thank you again for having a little time here. I've really enjoyed it and love meeting you, Bart, and connecting with you.
Likewise.
Again too. So thank you for your time. And,
thank you. And we'll be in touch, I'm sure. Have a fabulous week.
Okay, darling.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye, Nik.
Thank you for listening to the Spirit Ninjas Spiritual as Fuck podcast. Make sure to tune in next time for more deep conversations to uplift, inspire, and blow your mind. Spiritual as fuck.